Hello and welcome to Fats on Film. I am your host, Hannah Ogilvie, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things fat representation in film, TV, and wider media. This week I have a returning guest, but we have Val, who is the contributor for Ghouls Magazine, history buff, and fan of all things spooky and Halloween, and was last here to talk about Hot Fuzz. It's Val. Hi, Val.
Hello. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, happy to have you back. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, all chaotic and just moved and just got over COVID and yeah, it's all go.
So, Val, you were last here to talk about Hot Fuzz. I think I don't think Hot Fuzz needs any introduction, but we had a really good conversation about the fat representation in that, and mainly we're talking about Nick Frost's character. And then you sent me an email asking if we could continue our, I guess, analysis walkthrough of the Cornetto Trilogy, the three flavors Cornetto Trilogy, the three flavors Cornetto Trilogy, and you want to talk about World's End. So let's get into it. So World's End was a 2013, and Wikipedia describes it as an apocalyptic science fiction comedy, which I think is a massive spoiler. I read that and I was like, you've just spoiled it, Wikipedia. Anyway, directed by Edgar Wright, and the screenplay is written by Wright and Sean Pegg, just like the other films in this trilogy. And it is, as I mentioned, the third and final installment of the trilogy. It stars Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Paddy Considine, Martin Freeman, Eddie Marsan, Rosamund Pike, and Pierce motherfucking Brosnan. I fully forgot he was in it, and I was very excited to see Pierce. It was released on 19th of July 2013 in the UK, and it had a budget of $20 million and made $46.1 million. So it's a success. It made its money back and more. Let me try that again. At the 19th Critics' Choice Awards in January 2014, The World's End received 2 nominations for Best Actor in a Comedy for Simon Pegg and for Best Comedy Film. Did not win either, but nominated nonetheless. It did win, however, the Best British Film at the 19th Empire Awards in 2014, and at the 2014 MTV Movie Awards, one of the best award shows we should always give credit to. It received nominations for Best Fight, which was for the fight when they're in the bathroom, which I really want to get into, because I want to hear your, because you're a wrestling fan, right, Val?
I am, and I'm very excited to talk about the choreography in this.
Good.
Yes.
I remembered that from our last conversation, and as I was watching that scene, I was like, I don't know a lot about wrestling, like zero, and I was able to go, I feel like there are some signature moves going on here that I don't understand the context of. So we can talk about that. And also Best Comedic Performance for Simon Pegg. So that's our commercial overview. Val, could you please let me and the listeners know, what is The World's End all about?
Okay, so World's End, basically 5 estranged friends go back to the hometown of Newton Haven to complete the Golden Mile, which they did back in 1990 unsuccessfully. Most of them have gone on to lead successful lives, apart from Simon King, who we are first introduced to in rehab, and basically he is getting the band back together to complete what wasn't completed back in 1990. I think that's probably
perfect
enough without too much spoilers.
No, it's one of those things where I think actually you hit something there, where this is considered the lesser, and I'm using air quotes there, the lesser entry to this trilogy. And I'd only seen it when it first came out. You know, a massive fan of Shaun of the Dead, a massive fan of Hot Fuzz, so I was obviously excited to see the third one in this trilogy now, and I felt a bit let down. I didn't think it was as good, and I remember that being the kind of consensus of the time. However, rewatching it for this podcast, Val, it really is not a bad film at all.
Oh no, like literally. So from the absolute get-go, there is something brilliant that the writers, I think Edgar Wright actually wrote this as well, but
Yeah, he did with Peg. Yeah.
with Peg, is you get the entire film in that first 5 minutes.
Yes.
He
Yeah.
tells you everything that's going to happen, and the title of the pubs is
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
chapter headings.
Mhm.
Um, it is incredibly thought out, even to like when Sam gives Gary the out of order sign, and it gets used
Mhm.
later on as well.
Does.
Nothing is wasted.
Mm.
And there's always a little bit of a nod and a wink. The music is done brilliantly. So, one thing I want to talk about a little bit later on is the music. So,
Mhm.
for one example, really quickly, is
Yeah.
when they're at the school disco and the marmalade sandwich is dancing, you hear Step
Yes.
Back in Time. Um, yes. There's also a really good one in the car, but we'll go into that because I want to go into more of what it's about. But anyway,
Mhm.
yeah, it is a brilliant film.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when this came out in 2013, Val, were you similar to me? Were you like, oh yeah, can't wait to see the new, Simon Pegg, Nick Frost, Edgar Wright vehicle?
Weirdly, I don't think I was like pumped, but I
Mm.
think it was just one of those sort of like, oh yeah, we'll go and see it because it's the part of the Cornetto trilogy. It's Edgar Wright is always brilliant. We love
Mhm.
Simon Pegg and Nick Frost as a duo,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, just I also am a little bit of a Reece Smith obsessive, and I knew he was in it as well,
Yes.
so it was just like,
I know.
hey.
I clocked that. I clocked him. I was like, oh, this guy. And the other guy, the guy behind him, like he pops up in like random British sitcoms. Like I know him from Benidorm, for example.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, there's just these random men here.
Yeah, and also just yeah, so I feel like we kind of watched it and it was like, okay, yeah, it's
Mm.
cool. And then I think one of the reasons that it's kind of really, I've really kind of got to learn all the intricate details as well. Oh, and I love Martin Freeman in this.
Oh,
his
yeah,
his
same.
faces are used well. Um, but yeah, is it was the kind of comfort film when my partner was doing his dissertation. So
Mm.
when he was writing his dissertation, he likes to have noise in the background, whereas I'm quite the
Mm-hmm.
opposite. I'm just like, "Shh, go away," um, and it was on loop. um,
Yeah.
so every time I walked in, it was on. So
Wow.
and I think it was just that sort of like because you know it so well and it's comfort and it's not really distracting and you know yeah, so I think he found something helpful, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, he got a first, so
Oh well, it,
yeah,
it worked. It
yeah,
worked. I put him in the put Peg and Wright and Frost in the thank yous for that first. So I think like it makes sense from if we think about like what am I trying to say, yours and mine kind of journey through what we're talking about on this podcast. So if we talked about Hot Fuzz and we spoke about Nick Frost in that and how you know he plays the man child, for lack of a better term. He's a bit of the goofball,
mm.
a bit Arrested Development, and
Mm-hmm.
we talked about how they use his body type, like Nick Frost's natural body type. He's a larger man to accentuate those kind of qualities,
Mm.
and we had a really really good conversation about that. And so when you mentioned, oh, can we talk about World's End? And bearing in mind, I'd only ever seen it that once before back in 2013, probably maybe 2013, 2014. And I remember asking, like, is there much to talk about
Mm.
with fat representation, body representation? And you went, yeah, no, I think there is. So what was your instinct with thinking that the World's End would be a good topic of conversation for this podcast?
Um, I thought it was a good reason, a good basically subject for the podcast, mostly because
Mm.
in terms of cast, I actually think that Andy, which is Nick Frost's character, is the leader.
Mm-hmm.
Gary
Mm.
thinks he's the leader, but it's Andy
Mm-hmm.
because all of the characters want to know, is Andy involved? When
Yes.
Andy starts drinking again, that's when they're like, oh, okay, we're doing this now. And also,
Mm-hmm.
Andy is the one who basically holds the group together and fights off the blanks and is
Mm-hmm.
saving everybody, and notices all the problems. He is probably the more intelligent one, the more clued in
Mm-hmm.
one, and like basically he's a rugby player. He just
Yes.
bulldozes through everyone.
Yeah.
He is athletic, and the
Mm-hmm.
agility as well, because Nick Frost is a very agile and athletic guy, and I think
Mm-hmm.
this is why this is like the perfect role for him, because he really gets to showcase him as a strong athletic guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. I was pleasantly. I mean, I don't want to like I don't know give any spoilers to how I'm going to rate this film at the end of this, but I was so surprised at his characterization in this film because we are come. This is the third in a trilogy. We're so used to seeing Nick Frost as think about him as Ed in Shaun of the Dead, and then Danny in Hot Fuzz. He is the man child. Simon Pegg's always the one who's got to kind of maneuver him on the right path. If you think about Shaun of the Dead's Ed, he's so he's like a teenager, isn't he? He's just like really stubborn and really lazy. And then in Hot Fuzz, he is an actual child. I feel he's like 10 years old.
Yeah.
Think about it, with the cowboy costume on. So I wasn't expecting much variation on that. This is a tried and tested method. You have Simon Pegg's straight man, you have Nick Frost's man child, crack on. And then this film completely flips that dynamic where we have Nick Frost, as you said, and you're totally right. I never really thought of him as the leader, but he absolutely is. I just hadn't connected those dots in my head. But I was so impressed to see him be the straight man. I think as an actor, he performed it incredibly well. It's so believable. His anger in some of the scenes, he's so angry at Gary, was palpable, because I want to get into Gary because I fucking hate him. And I know you're meant to sympathize.
Yeah.
I know you're meant to sympathize.
Not at the beginning. Absolutely
No.
not. No,
I
think
just
it's
like,
not until
mate.
he sends Sam off in the car. That's kind of when we turn a bit.
I no, because I think he has like an ulterior motive in that, and that's the problem. He has an ulterior motive all the way throughout, and it's not until literally the very last pub, the World's End, do we understand what his motivation is. And he's just the worst possible friend ever.
Oh god, yeah.
And you're right, where he thinks he is the leader of this group, and maybe when you are 16. You would put someone like him in charge because he's the mouthy one, he's the leery one. He's the one who doesn't seem to give a shit about authority. Yeah, he's the perfect guy to be in charge. When they're they're approaching 40, they mention that a few times. He's the worst person to be in charge, and so you see Andy pick up that mantle, and I guess what's really interesting is to talk about his relationship with alcohol. I find really interesting because he is teetotal. So he hasn't drank in so many years since this accident that we don't find out what happens until later into the film. But he hasn't drank since a drink driving accident. And then when things start to go off, when they realise that Newton Haven has been overtaken by these robots, that's when he starts to take these shots. And like you say, there is a real change in the dynamic of the group, because all of a sudden Andy's on their side. He's not judging from afar. He's within it now, but he's still the leader. He's still the muscle, the brain, and I don't know, just like you say, the smartest person, the most switched on person with what's going on.
Yeah.
And then we have that amazing fight scene which we mentioned earlier in the bathroom, where he is so he's so fit, like you said earlier, he's such an athletic person. He is defending all of his friends against these robots. I know they're not called robots. I know that's the whole point, the joke of the film. Blanks, yeah, blanks, the blanks. And I saw when that scene happened, I was like, oh, this is so fun to watch
Yeah.
this large man absolutely dominate physically, athletically, like stamina wise. I was just so overjoyed to see it, Val.
And also, just so this is what I was talking about, like the beginning of the film when you see them as the younger 17-year-olds,
Yes.
and then later on as well,
Mm-hmm.
everything is mirrored. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a scene where when we first meet Andy, and he is on the rugby team, and he's running and everybody's chasing him, and he's got the ball
Yes.
and he's
Yeah.
ahead. And then later on, when he's trying to get the blanks away, which is actually
Yeah.
what Sean does in Shaun of the Dead when he takes them
Mm.
around the pub, but in this one it's
Mm-hmm.
Andy. So again, everything is weird. Everything is mirrored for the 17-year-old stuff, but also everything is kind of, there's a little mirror as well to all the other Cornetto trilogies. But
Yes.
yeah, he is ahead of the crowd that is chasing him
Mm-hmm.
again, and he is like that dominant athlete, and he is basically like winning the game. Um, which is a funny little mirror that I didn't actually think about before.
Mm.
It was just another
Mm-hmm.
one of those, like, even when Gary King's like, we're gonna paint the town red, and then at the end it's red, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, but also you said about the bathroom choreography scene.
Mm.
I think that kind of gives you a little glimpse into what he can do. But then when
Mm-hmm.
he's in the bar, and we
Yes.
meet Pierce Brosnan's
Mm-hmm.
teacher character, and then they start fighting, then he's taken on like 5 or 6 at the same
I
time,
know.
and it's
I
just
know.
perfect, like with the chairs, like, so there's
Yeah.
props, there's like
Yeah.
used in the bar, it's slamming. So we were talking about wrestling earlier, but so
Mm.
actually one that Gary King does in the bathroom, the first blank to be dismantled, was at a rock bottom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's literally, so you put the arm over your shoulder, and you lift the person up so they're
Right.
facing you, and then you
Yeah.
slam them down. And obviously he takes his head off doing that, but
Yes.
yeah. So there's a few kind of, yeah, there's a bit of that with the choreography. But yeah, I personally think that the bar scene when
Mm-hmm.
he's like literally he does the big boot as well, which is often
Okay.
used by like Kane and the Undertaker and Test,
Right.
who are all very much you know 6'8" plus wrestlers, that
Mm-hmm.
they
Oh,
just do the
wow.
big boot. And
Okay.
yeah, like, so yeah, but he's got someone as well in a headlock at the same time as
Mm-hmm.
doing that, so he's just like, he's everywhere.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, but
amazing.
he is such a dominant force in that scene, and again, I love that bar scene where he picks up the stools and he's like almost using them as armor, isn't he?
Mm,
Like armor and weapons, and again, I know
yes.
there's uh wordplay with all of their last names being to do with like royal families. So like it's Oliver Chamberlain, I think it's Stephen Page. I'm not sure what Andy's last name is. Andy Knight, and then
Yes.
Gary King.
Yes.
So they're all like to do with like the royal court, and it makes sense that, like, in that moment he dons his armor, he puts on, like, he embodies the knight to protect the king, who's just in the back desperate to down his pint. And you get that scene like twist the melon, and he's just like, oh, like,
Yeah.
I just really, we don't often, Val, get to see this level of physicality in bigger actors or actresses.
Yeah.
And I think what's really important for me, personally, is that it's never commented on.
No.
It's never, no one ever, Gary never goes, God, you can still move fast, even though you've put on weight throughout the years. Like, that'd be like any other film would have done that.
Yeah.
Like, oh God, you still move quickly.
It's
Like, oh, you still got it in you.
it's interesting as well that the only person they comment on size is Steve.
Steve, yeah,
Yeah, and like, it's really weird. Sorry, I wrote it down. So
yeah,
literally,
please do.
So the first time they comment on it is when Gary goes like, so Sam goes, "Oh, you've grown," and then Gary
Mm-hmm.
goes sideways, and then
Sideways.
he goes steroids, and we know that Stephen's been working out, and we know that he's dating a fitness coach. So I
Yes.
kind of associated that firstly with like he's
Mm.
bulking up rather than it being like calling him like, excuse the word, but fat.
Mm-hmm.
But then Gary comments again not long after, literally like 10 minutes later, and says that Steve's let himself go, which is kind of
Yes.
actually the opposite of what he was saying
Yep.
beforehand. So
Mm-hmm.
Gary's just commenting on his weight, but he can't
Mm.
actually decide. Sort of basically, he's just making comments to be a dickhead.
Yes, and you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Those are the only two moments I clocked, and they weren't to do with Andy, which would have been the obvious target in the situation.
Mm,
But yeah, they're against Steve, which is Paddy Considine's character.
mm,
And you're right. Gary's comments, you put them side by side, are from completely two different points of views.
mm.
But I think the motivation is to undermine Steve in
Yeah.
front of Sam, Rosamund Pike's character, because that's a whole thing that they both fancy her. And back in the day, Gary like bulldozed his way in the disabled toilets, which I want to get into because I was. I mean, I know it's 2013. I know it's 10 years ago, but I was like, this is not appropriate.
Well, the
Like,
thing that is interesting though is A, it's Gary King saying it, and B, the look that the others give him, like,
mm,
how dare you?
mm-hmm,
Um, like, no one actually calls him out on it, but
mm,
call out your friends if your friends are being dicks. But
please do.
they clearly disagree with his viewpoints.
Yeah, and you actually said something really important there, which is like calling Gary out. And from memory, the only person who really calls Gary out until like obviously shit hits the fan is Andy. You know,
Yes.
when the first round and Andy wants to drink a pint of water, and Gary, he really throws his toys at the pram, and Andy has that amazing quote about being like, a big burly rugby player going up to a bar with other big, ugly rugby players and ordering a pint of water. That takes real balls.
Mm.
And I love that. And I love that point of view. Like, there's nothing, I don't know, the peer pressure to drink alcohol. I think we've all experienced it. You experience it when you were younger. And even now, like, I'm in my 30s. But sometimes, like, if I want, I've got a really good relationship with alcohol. I can take it or leave it. But if I don't want to drink one night, I will always get at least someone saying like, "Oh, is everything okay? Are you sure? Oh, go
Mm.
have one."
Yeah. Oh, are you sure you don't want anything in that? Like every time I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
just have a cola. Don't you sure you don't want anything in that? Like, no, I just want a cola. Thank you.
yeah. And I really, I really resonated with Andy really having to defend himself, and that's why I was a little bit gutted that he then drops his sobriety.
Mm.
And I guess, do you have any thoughts about why Andy drops his sobriety? I guess maybe the joke is like, oh fuck it, like everything's gone to shit. I'm going to need
Yeah.
a drink to get through
So
this.
he does actually say that. It's actually so. This is actually one of my favorite scenes in World's
Okay.
End, which is when Sam kind of asks him like, "What you doing?" He turns around and basically says, "We're going to carry on doing the Golden Mile because no one else has a better idea. So fuck it." And he punches the window and opens it.
Oh, he does.
I'm
Yes,
like,
he
oh my
does.
god!
Such a good scene.
But it is that exactly what you just said. It is that sort of fuck it mentality of like, do
Mm,
you know what? I don't even know if I'm going to get out of here alive. So do you know what? It just doesn't even matter anymore. And the fact that like, at one point you could tell he's like physically like, because at first he's like no, and then when he comes out
mm,
of the school disco, he looks at his hand, he's angry, but he does kiss the other girl as well. And I think it is that fuck it mentality because he would never do that to his wife. But
mm,
I think like, so he's dropped the sobriety, he's following Gary King, he's, you know, got off with one of the marmalade sandwich and lost his wedding ring. And, but like, there's still that thing of like, what am I doing? This is stupid. But also it's just this sort of like, well, the world's obviously been invaded or something. So who cares?
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's just that sort of almost self-destruct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there might also be something in this about so the he's a YouTuber. It's Ryan Hollinger or Hollinger, I'm not sure which one. But he's an Irish YouTuber. He creates movie analysis, and he did the Cornetto Trilogy not long ago, actually. And so I watched his The World's End one in preparation for this podcast, and he mentioned how this film is about longing for youth and longing for what it the simple, and I'm going to put that in air quotes because I guess not every 17-year-old's life is simple, but there is a level of simplicity that comes from, like, you know, you've just finished school, you know, your whole life's ahead of you, you don't have like a mortgage to pay or rent to pay or bills to pay, you know, again, I appreciate that's not every 17-year-old's experience, but it is a lot. And when I saw Andy start to self-destruct, which I think is a really good phrase for this particular situation, I thought it felt like he was reverting back to his old ways when life was simpler.
Yeah.
You know, when he wasn't married, he didn't have a wife, he could get off with one of the marmalade sandwich with no consequences. He could have, you know, what is 5 shots at once because who gives a fuck, right? Because you're 17, you know, your whole life's ahead of you, you can do dumb stuff like that. And I think you're right, as the story progresses, as we go further into the Golden Mile, he starts to come back around as the situation proves to be more and more dire and more serious. And again, especially when they realise that Oliver's been taken. Oliver's been taken by the Blanks, and that's Martin Freeman's character. Like, just touching on Martin Freeman, I am not a Martin Freeman fan. I really am not. But he is great in this film. And what I find really interesting is this, to the audience, it's really clear that he is switched.
Yeah.
But you could appreciate from the gang, they're too wasted to notice.
Yeah, I love that when he comes out from the bathroom as well. And like they again, it's signposted. Oliver never made it this far.
Yes.
And he drops off at the same point that he dropped off last time. But when he comes out, he is a different person. His whole persona has changed. He's cheerier. He's chipper. He's like, hey!
And he's like, he's egging them on.
Yeah.
Well, who's getting the pints in, you know?
Yeah.
That
and like,
he's
you
part
know,
of it.
later on with Peter as well, he drops off at the same point. As well, but I feel like there's a little bit more. So when you were talking about as well earlier, friends calling out friends, again, it's Andy who calls Gary out for basically completely ignoring Peter's pain.
Honestly, this scene.
And, that moment, yeah.
Right. So, you know, I've already signposted don't like Gary at all, but yes, a really. First of all, I don't like Martin Freeman as an actor, but I love all of the other 4 characters apart from Gary. And so when Peter has his monologue talking about how awfully bullied he was by that guy and how, like, actually, you know, it says that the worst thing about it is that he looked right through me and didn't even recognize me, like it was all for nothing. Honestly, my heart broke because I think I have a theory, and this people might disagree with this, but I have a theory that you're either bullied or you are a bully. And I think, as someone who has been bullied, I really felt Peter's agony in that moment, and I think Eddie Marsan plays it so well, and even all the other like characters, like, you know, Steve and Andy and Oliver, all watching intently and, you know, just really appreciating him for opening up. And then Gary comes in with the shots, making it all about him again, and I was just like, oh my god, this dickhead. And you're right, Andy's the one to be like that, you know. Well, I don't know what he says exactly. You might remember, it's like Peter just says something really difficult then, and you've just completely, like, you know, steamrolled over it. You've not even acknowledged it. And where we talk a lot about toxic masculinity in today's like media, seeing as this is 10 years ago,
Mm.
that's a really important conversation to be having with your boys. Well,
Yeah.
I say your boys, any of your friends, you know, that can happen in any kind of friendship group where someone opens up being incredibly vulnerable and another person dismisses it.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing more invalidating than someone dismissing your intense emotions.
Mm.
And if you didn't hate Gary before that moment, you definitely do after.
Yeah, especially as well, like it's not long after that his phone rings as well, and we kind of found out that the lie that or the pretense that he
Oh,
brought
yes.
everybody together is actually a complete lie. So, but spoiler, he lies about his mum dying of cancer.
Yeah.
And it's really weird because we know it's a lie at the beginning, and it's not until you've watched the film a couple of times that you notice that when he walks out of Andy's office after he's told him that, he winks at the receptionist as a sort of like, "Hey,
Right.
got him" kind of thing. And it's a little bit like, "Oh, you naughty boy," but like, but also this is a common trait with like, I'm not going to speak for addiction because luckily I don't experience addiction, and I know it is an illness, and we should never dismiss anybody who suffers from it. But that's a trait that is usually that comes with the addiction package, is lying, and using other people as kind of leverage as well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Whether it's sort of lying to say, "Oh, I didn't have that drink," or lying to be like, "Oh, like in this case, like, oh, I need sympathy and I need sympathy quickly. Let's just say my mum died." you know
Yeah.
So that was a nervous laugh, sorry. But
No, no.
yeah so yeah, it's again, but it's strange because, like, obviously we hate Gary King because he is an utter selfish prick, but also it's like he is suffering from a disease, and so there's a little bit of like understanding for his behavior. But yeah, anyway, that was that point.
Yeah, I think talking a bit more about Gary. So yeah, we understand he's obviously had at least a drug addiction, potentially an alcohol addiction, but that is definitely more drugs. And he has recently tried to take his own life.
Mm.
But we find that out at the very end. The very end of the film, we realize that that's where, like, this is where his motivation to finish the Golden Mile is, because he has faced a life where he thought he would be king of the world. You know, his name's Gary King. He thought it was his entitlement to be a complete, success, and to find that the past 23 years ish, he hasn't amounted to anything. And
well,
sorry, go on.
no, I was just going to say, so I was just building on that. Literally in the rehabilitation circle, therapy circle, but he says at the very end of his monologue, obviously we've gone through everything that they went through that night. He says, and that was the best night, and it couldn't get any better than that, and it never has. And again, it's that little pinpoint at the end of the movie where you find out that it never actually did get better. And it's like, I don't know if it's because his friends deserted him, he ended up isolated and turning into himself, the pressure to be responsible, and not really knowing how to deal with that. But yeah, like, we don't really know what it was that, obviously, why he couldn't carry on, but like that night was sort of the full stop for him.
Yeah, well, I think it's clear that they do hang on for a bit, but it's the car accident in 96. So we find that Gary has overdosed, and Andy, being was like 3 or 4 times over the limit, has to get him to a hospital. So drives under the influence, breaking the law, crashes his car because he's driving drunk, and that's what kind of happened. And Gary deserts him at the scene. And so where Andy was willing to sacrifice his future, sacrifice his freedom to drive, sacrifice potential job opportunities in order to save his mate, when he needs to return the favor, he can't do it. And I think for Andy, and well, we don't know, but we know that obviously, you mentioned earlier how the other men won't go to Newton Haven without Andy's say. So they obviously know what happened, and they're on Andy's side with it. And that again is reflected at the end when they're in the World's End, just before he pulls the pint to go down. He says, "I would have gone to the ends of the earth for you." That's how much Andy loved Gary. But in that moment in 96, he realised that Gary didn't share that same love for Andy. And it's probably because the most important person in Gary's life is himself.
Yeah.
And, again, to use the same kind of disclaimer that you did, I don't have personal experience with addiction. But my understanding is one of the other traits, you mentioned lying, but one of the traits that can come with addiction is narcissism. And so, like, Gary is an incredibly narcissistic person, even to the point of, on this journey of the Golden Mile, he is willing to put all of his friends in danger, bar Sam, who he does put in a car to drive away. But everyone else is, chasing around after him, trying to protect him, while he finishes the Golden Mile to finish his crowning achievement of his life, something he started 23 years ago.
He saves his pint. And then, when he couldn't save his pint, he gets a new one.
Yeah.
Like, that's the most important thing to him, like you said, himself, and that drink
himself.
at the Golden Mile. Yeah.
Exactly. And so going back to that scene, that bar scene, you've got Gary trying to get his pint, it getting smashed, pouring another one, whatever it might be, where Andy, Steve, Sam, is Peter still around at that point? They're all...
Peter, right, so in the bathroom scene, Peter tries to hide in a cubicle, but I think in the actual bar scene, he does get involved a little bit.
Good.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So so you've got the men fighting to protect themselves, their group. But Gary, and again, it's very similar to when you think about royalty, the king doesn't often fight. It's his people that will fight. So it makes sense for Gary not to partake in all the violence, because he wouldn't. He's well, I'm just going to sit here drinking my mead. He's got his minions doing it.
Oh, I didn't think
of that. And I guess, there's a lot of you said earlier, this is a very efficient film. They thought about everything, down to the names. And again, that's very similar to Hot Fuzz, where we mentioned all of the last names are of old timey-wimey English jobs, like Cartwright and Wainwright, for example, for the Andes. Rafe Spall is in this film as well. When I saw him, I was like, there he is. he got to be in this one somewhere. He is the prospective buyer of Oliver's house he's trying to sell.
Oh, I was too fixated on Alice Lowe. I was and then Queen.
I didn't even realize that was Alice Lowe.
Yeah.
But that's Rafe Spall. And then they're the same couple at the end when Blank Oliver's showing them round the house. Oh, it's so funny. It's so stupid.
Actually, so I love what was it in the therapy group? Sitting next to him is Mary.
Mary. Clocked her straight away.
Yeah.
Mary from Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah. But so it's funny that we were talking as well about stuck in adolescence, arrested development.
Yeah.
So I didn't actually realise this, but the song that's being played in the car, my partner pointed this out to me as we were rewatching it. He literally pointed at the telly and went, "Arrested Development." I was like, "What?" He was like, "The song." I was like, "Oh."
Is it
Oh,
called that?
I don't know if it's called it, if it's like a theme or something, but yeah, I think like the song's called Arrested Development. I was like, so this was credit to my partner, but but I was like, oh, okay, and also. So I wrote this one down, and again, credit to
Mhm.
my partner because this is another thing that he noticed, and I was like, I'm stealing that, but I'm going to credit him where credit's due. Um, Ship of thesis. So everything has been replaced. So they're basically, I think it's a Greek mythology, which is basically the ship of thesis. The ship of, I'm saying it right. I think it's thesis. I might be wrong.
Mhm.
Somebody please do
Okay.
correct if I'm wrong. But basically, the ship has had all of its parts that's been replaced. So the sail and the decking and stuff like that. So
Yes. Yeah,
is
like
it
the
the
car.
same ship? And that's
Yes.
the car. The car is
Yeah.
the ship, but also the people. The people
The
have been
people.
replaced. So
By
are
the
they?
blanks.
Yeah. So it's a Greek mythology.
Oh my god, there's so many layers.
I know, that's why it's so brilliant.
Jesus.
And honestly,
Wow.
please do tweet and stuff and being like, you're pronouncing it wrong. It is pronounced
Oh,
this.
it's
I am
fine.
terrible at pronunciations, and I accept that. So...
That's cool. That's fine. That's a really interesting point. And so let's explore, like, we understand really quickly from Gary. If you compare him to the other four men, proper dad clothes, right?
Oh yeah.
Oliver's got the suit on with the Bluetooth. God, do you remember them Bluetooth mics?
Yes.
Every arsehole had one, didn't
Yes, and
they?
you always thought they were talking to themselves, and then suddenly
Yes,
you'll see the little blue glow, which I think
the
is
blue, like,
brilliant as well. When he starts talking, and Gary's like me,
I've
sort
been
of
here the
thing.
whole
It's
time.
like, not talking to you.
Yeah, it's so good, and I'm glad that Oliver gets that moment because Gary deserves to be put in his place.
Mm,
Ugh.
yeah,
And yeah, Steve, very dad clothing, um, just dads, and then you have Gary in the same car, like you mentioned, the
oh yeah,
beast,
the
and,
beast.
and you have him in this like long trench coat, the dyed hair,
Yeah, the
and
thinning dyed hair as well.
oh,
It's
honestly,
so funny.
he makes me cringe so much, Val. And I think one of the reasons why, and this is credit to Simon Pegg, this is credit to the writing, I think everyone knows a Gary King.
Yes, and what is it? Is he wearing a Sisters of Mercy t-shirt or
Yes, yeah, they mentioned
Bauhaus?
Sisters of Mercy a lot because he's got the tattoo, doesn't he?
Yeah, so yeah, I notice a lot of the music when Gary King's around is kind of like that late 80s not
Mm,
new romantic, like kind of that gothic kind of romantic kind of, so
okay,
uh Sisters of Mercy and like Susie and the Banshees and all that kind of vibe.
okay,
Um
yeah,
but yeah, and it's not until I think like they start fighting with the blanks where you start getting like proper like up to date like techno and stuff like that. So it's all kind of stuck in that time period. And like I
mm-hmm,
said earlier, with Step Back in Time, the Kylie Minogue song,
mm-hmm.
very late 80s, same as like around that sort of locomotion era and stuff like that. So yeah, like it's all very kind of stuck in that old time. And yeah, like so sometimes like when I'm shopping or whatever, because I'm a little bit sort of gothic and stuff like that, I kind of start being like, oh, I wish I could still wear these things. Like, because I used to do the corset and the big floaty dresses and stuff when I
Mm-hmm.
was like 17 and stuff. I used to basically try to dress like a Victorian or something. It was either that or skinny jeans and crop tops.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I'm Tesco goth. it's it's lots of leggings and really baggy jumpers.
Mm-hmm.
you
But
know,
are you comfortable?
I am so comfortable and I don't
That's
care.
all that matters. Yeah,
So
100%.
yeah,
But I think like this is the thing. Like I don't necessarily have a problem with Gary dressing that way if he truly wants to.
mm,
but it's clear that he's trying to be younger Gary, isn't it? Like it's not coming from a place of I've grown up, but I still feel this way. It's he never has grown up.
Yeah,
He's never. He's got the same car, you know. He's lying in the same way that like kids lie, you know, lying that their mum's dead. You know what I mean? Like there's just he is just such a child, and I think when we have the whole Sam coming into the group. And we understand from the monologue at the very beginning that he had taken Sam into the disabled at whatever pub it is and had some fun. And then he had to let her go, right? He had to, I had to keep going. And we find out again that, like, you know, he assumes that that's what will happen again 23 years later. So he follows her into the ladies' bathroom and just feels entitled that they will have sex again, even though they haven't seen each other in 20 odd years. And he's just such a misogynist arsehole in this moment. And then even like within that, like there's that horrible moment where this feels like such a man writing, and I know it is because it's a man writing, but he mentions the twins, Sam's friends, and he mentions how he's had sex with both of them at the same time once. And there was a real period of time where comedy loved to talk about twins and having sex with twins. And I really want to like make it clear, like that's really weird and wrong and incestuous. Like that shouldn't be something you aspire to. But apparently it's like a male fantasy. You wanted to say something?
No, just like literally it was exactly what you were saying. Like it's it's a really weird incestuous desire. It's just like
it's so weird.
No, but it's strange. But I mean, I don't know.
No, I don't know.
Does it actually happen? I don't
know.
No,
of course it doesn't. That's not reality.
Yeah.
But with Sam, and like, you know, she gets there to reminisce with her old school friends, and he instantly sexualizes her, pervs on her to the point where, like, you know, Steve's gone to get her a drink and she'd come back and she's like, you know what, I'm just going to leave, because that's how like how hostile of an environment he's made it. And I know they kind of be like, oh come on Gary, why'd you go and do that? I was like, no, that's sad, that's scary, that like Oliver's sister didn't want to spend any time with the group, you know, especially obviously like with Steve, that they equally fancy each other, but he's like, you know what, I'm not going to be treated like a piece of shit by Gary, so I'm out. And he just gets away with it. He just gets away with it. And I know you mentioned earlier how you believe he redeems himself by getting Sam out of there, but I think his ulterior motive is to always come out on top of Steve. He's like, well, I was the one who put her in the car, not you, Steve.
No, I agree. No, I completely.
So we've spoken a lot about Nick Frost and Andy's plus size characterization. There's some real positives within it. He is our hero, and even within that, so I guess like we're dancing around the end, but ultimately at the end, Gary, Andy, and Steve managed to talk the network out of pulling out of the Earth. Now, Val, this really falls down in the story for me, because I was watching it intently, and I'm like, I don't understand how they won. And the joke is like Bill Nye goes, there's just no arguing with you. Well, right?
Yeah, I was going to mention that they say that to him a lot throughout the entire film. And I suppose it is a little bit like that child that you just, you know, they're going to scream in the supermarket and you just, you know, you can tell them that, look, we're having a nice time and I'm going to buy you some chocolate. And they'll just sit and scream because, I don't know, children are possessed. But,
yeah.
You know, like, but yeah, he is that screaming toddler in a weird way of just like, you can't argue with him and you're not going to get, you know, he will argue with you that red is blue, you know, and he knows he's wrong, but he will still argue anyway.
Yeah.
and it's too exhausting.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I know people like that, and
Oh,
sometimes you just
yeah.
kind of have to stare at them blankly and just be like, okay, and then try and choose the subjects. It's just like, I don't have the energy. So,
Yeah. I totally agree. I think Gary's characterization, as much as I dislike it, like it feels real. Like we do know people like this, and the phrase like there's no arguing with you, or Andy says exacerbated, like, oh, you're always right, aren't you? Like he hasn't won, the other one's just relented.
yeah,
And it's interesting because when you have like true arguments or true debates, both sides have something to say, and the other side, you could always agree to disagree, don't get me wrong, but there isn't any of that intellectual adult conversation between Gary and whoever else. It's just always him just go, undermining, mocking, uh, being homophobic. The old ducky thing about drinking a glass of water, I was like, whoa, that, I mean, again, I appreciate maybe they were going, well, of course Gary would say that because he's a piece of shit, but I was also like, are we meant to laugh here? Like, where's the joke? Like, there were a few moments where I felt like that. I was like, oh, are we meant to laugh at Gary's obsceneness, or are we meant to laugh with him because that's a funny line?
So there was one point, what was it, when he's saying that the disableds are out of order, and then like he turns around to Sam and he's like, oh, you don't know what they're thinking half the time, and like Sam kind of side eyes him, and I remember just turning around to my partners who were watching it, and I was just like, oh, there that was okay, like.
But then they have a history of that with Hot Fuzz, with what's the guy from Game of Thrones called? Him. Yarp. Yeah, we know they're put Michael, thank you. Yeah. We know they have that history of mocking mentally disabled people. So it's like, again, like, are you wanting us to laugh at that joke, that inappropriate joke from Gary, or are we meant to laugh at like the obsceneness of it? Like, oh my god, like, I can't believe you just said that. You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't. There was some moments where I was like, I don't know what the motivation is behind this particular line.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, yeah, I honestly, I don't know. It's weird because I'm trying to like put my brain back 10 years and trying to be like, what was on telly at the time and what was that sort of humour. I think it was that kind of sort of very dismissive of other, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like, I get whereas that. These days, like that wouldn't slide at all unless it is very, very much framed with the idea of, rather than it being like general humor or whatever, it is that very much framed as a sort of nasty person. And it's an understanding of like, we're not supposed to laugh with them, we're kind of like, you're actually more sort of like seeing that as a characteristic of intolerant person. But which there's always an argument about whether it should be included or not, but I think it depends on how it's been framed. So personally, I don't think we should ever erase characteristics of intolerant people, because unfortunately there are intolerant people, and that is realism, I suppose. But it depends on what you're writing. If you're trying to make them the comedic character, no. But if you're trying to show them as a flawed individual, then it works.
I understand what you're saying. Like, if the if the film frames that behavior or that comment as bad, and the film uses that as an opportunity to highlight that, then great. Yeah. But I think in this, and I appreciate it's 10 years old. Oh yeah. I felt in this film it wasn't clear. That framing wasn't clear, and it just is something I went, like you say, like when you saw that the mentally disabled joke. It's, oh, that happened. Like, you know, it feels very like that.
Yeah,
with
it's
a few
very
things
kind
in
of
this film.
grown, like just sort of like, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I feel like, I mean, you know, overall it's a very funny film, but sometimes a lot of the things that Gary says is very kind of like, ugh, like yeah, just that grown sort of like, oh really? But yeah, I think he is that person like, you know, that guy that comes along to the pub and he's like your mate's mate or whatever, and like,
Yes.
and you always just kind of like, okay, just smile and nod, and then we'll get to the end of the night.
100%. I know
Yeah,
exactly what you mean.
yeah.
There's another joke that really didn't land for me as well. And every time it happened, I was like, why? And that's Rosamund Pike's, oh, crumbs. Like, every time she said it, I was like, shut up. That's such a. It's not even funny. I don't know what the joke is. It's just get her to say, oh, fuck. You know what I mean? That would be a lot funnier than crumbs. It's really weird. And I
Yeah.
guess, because it's not like she doesn't say fuck. Like, she does, you know, it doesn't sound like she was like a, I don't know, meant to be like a Mary Poppins type, and she would never swear, but she does swear. So, just every so often, it did that would come up. And it really annoyed me.
It could possibly be that old-fashioned ideology that women swearing aren't attractive.
Maybe, but she
But
does.
yeah, so it's strange. And like, we know that's not the thinking of the writers, because like, for example, in Shaun of the Dead, oh my goodness, I can't remember Shaun's girlfriend's name.
Liz.
Liz, that's it. Liz swears a lot. You know,
A lot, and I love it.
yeah, and like,
She's
you know,
so funny.
especially when she goes off at him at the apartment. Like, I don't want to fucking go to the Winchester. You know, it's not the only fucking place in the world, Sean. You know, like,
so good.
And it's so realistic. You know, it's like the failed actress and the twat. I did not call her a failed
Diane.
Diana failed actress. So, you did call him a twat then.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. You would, though.
Yeah.
David is so annoying.
I rewatched Shaun of the Dead the other day. It's another one I want to talk about one day, but yeah.
It's a phenomenal film. Phenomenal film.
Anyway.
So we get to the end. We get to the world's end finally, because Gary's determined to finish the Golden Mile, right? And then we have that amazing scene as they're running towards the world's end, the pub, and Nick is running, and he does this amazing roll through the modern art statue. And I thought, this is so cool. I just loved it. I loved it so much. And then he punches whoever it is out of the marmalade sandwich to get his ring back.
Yes,
and again,
right in the gut. And he puts it back on.
Puts it back on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, like you were saying, like, you know, he did go through a self-destruction for, like, you know, maybe like three or four pubs, but he's sobering up now, and he knows what's important, and he gets to the pub, and he's just wrestling Gary to not have this. But why is this so important? Can we not just get out of here? And inadvertently, like, you know, they pull the wrong lever. Wrong lever! And they end up going down into the basement, which is where apparently that's like the hub of the network, which is like the bad aliens, and voiced by Bill Nye, of course. And we find out, like, oh, like, they've been putting in these blanks to help the human population become more, I don't know, socially acceptable, more advanced in their thinking, more polite, in order to elevate their status amongst the universe. And they've had all these hubs all over the world to do this. And through words, I can't say more than that, Val, but through words, they managed to convince the network, or not convince the network, but exacerbate the network to just leave. And you know, they you know, give Gary his own young blank to be like, you could just, you know, live your life as, you know, your perpetually youthful 17-year-old self. And, you know, Gary says there's only one Gary King, and, you know, he is the king. No, you know, takes his head off, because that's a thing, isn't there? There's a pub that says the King's Head, or
King's
something
Head,
like that.
yeah,
exactly. So and then the network pulls out, and apparently that means that the entire world is going to like set alight. And Sam comes back and saves them all, and they drive off and they manage to evade the big explosion. And then that's when like the ending is now narrated by Andy, going back to what you were saying at the beginning, which is like Andy is the leader. He is the leader to the audience anyway. And what's really interesting about this, Val, is like the world has ended. Like we're now in like post-apocalyptic world, which I remember when I first watched this, I never saw this coming. I was like, I never thought it would go that extreme to be like the literal world has ended. But he says that after that night, him and Gary went their separate ways, and he doesn't know where Gary is now. Because they can't talk, because the reason why we had mobile phones is because of the network. So now the network's gone, we don't have mobile phones. But what do you think about that? Like, after everything they've been through, Andy saving Gary's life multiple times throughout the night, and Gary just goes a separate way.
Yeah, well, he kind of forms his own group, doesn't he? And he kind of, so he can be a leader of that group. And I think he actually sort of, he kind of learns from Andy, because he goes into that pub full of like burly guys.
Yes.
And he orders a water. Five waters, and that is Andy's influence. But Andy is off basically, like, so again, Gary King's kind of doing what Gary King's always done. You know, he's going round the pubs, and like, yeah, he's teetotal now, but he's trying to be a leader of the 4 other guys, and he's going to the pubs. So he hasn't really changed. But Andy is basically teaching the next generation, and he's also him and his wife have like an allotment, so they're basically trying to make do with sort of creating a new civilization and trying to rebuild their lives and go forward. And you know, like as you said, like you know, he's narrating the story, but we see when he comes back, he's narrating the story to this like younger audience who's sort of learning about what happened. So I think that's one of the things, especially it's one of the reasons I admire teachers so much as well, is like, to go forward sometimes you have to look back, but you don't relive the experience, you learn from it. And so I'm a big history geek, so but yeah, so I feel like it is that sort of like he's teaching everybody about what happened, but so that they can grow and build upon it, and the fact that he's got his family and he's got his kids, and that's the things that's important to him. And like using the land and stuff like that, but it's sort of building on your skills. You know, we've got Tesco's round the corner, we can order an Uber, stuff like that. But if all of this was to ever go, you know, would we have the skills to be able to grow our own crops? And but he does. He is like the ultimate leader in that sense, you know, the person who provides. So he provides knowledge and sustenance. Sorry, no, we love Andy.
We love Andy. And again, like any other film would, you know, we see this a lot where people talk about post-apocalyptic stuff. They always go, why is there someone fat in the post-apocalyptic world? There'd be no food, you'd lose all the weight. You know, bullshit, because that's not how it works. So anyway, I like how Nick, I mean, not that Nick Frost would have or could have lost the weight in order to portray a post-apocalyptic body. And again, I'm using air quotes because what the fuck is that? But he is still a bigger guy. You know, he's still a bigger guy. You know, he says we're eating all organic now because they have no choice. And there's that amazing shot. They've got to get the Cornetto wrapper in, right? So they get the green Cornetto wrapper for sci-fi, kind of like hits the fence, and he like longs for it. He's like, and then it's gone because it's just a wrapper. And you know, you might hear that and go, oh well, you know, you've got like a bigger guy longing for food. It's like, no. In this context, anybody would be longing for like a cornetto,
Just sugar, yeah.
Just sugar, like just something of the old world. So that's not commentary on Andy as a larger character at all.
No.
It's just anyone. They could have put any of the characters in that situation. It would have played the same. And then, you say we don't know where he goes. I don't know where Gary is, but I hope he's happy, or he says something like that, which is a really lovely thing to say. Like, I know like no one from my school anymore, and for a variety of different reasons. But I, for the most of them, I wish them well. That's kind of where you get to with a lot of your friends from school. Like, very rarely do people maintain friendships post-school. Some people are really good at it, some people aren't. I'm definitely one of the nots. But I wish them well. And I feel like Andy has that same sentiment. Like, he was a guy, he was my best friend at school. We saved the world, kinda. And I wish him well. But what I find interesting about Gary's arc is his happy ending is him continuing to be the leader of that child group, of him, of the child. It's the children, like youths from what's it called? What's that town called? Newton Haven, and that they had the bathroom brawl with. Those are the blanks he's now running with. And what I find interesting. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and we see him throughout the film kind of looking longingly at them. So, like, when they're playing pool and stuff like that, he's constantly looking at them and, like, smiling, like, yeah, they know how to have fun. Kind of,
Well, it's interesting you say that, because what I find really interesting about how the bathroom brawl starts is Gary starts picking a fight on this kid. I said, this kid must be minimum 18 years old, right? Or maximum 18 years old. And I was just like, why, Gary, get back in your fucking box. You're like 40. Why are you picking on this kid? And I think it's really weird, personally, that he ends up being the leader of these kids. And I know it's painted to be like he's defending them because they're blanks and everyone wants to kill the blanks because they caused this. But then what I find really interesting about that final scene is, he goes in, like you say, Andy's influence. He's now no longer drinking alcohol. Fantastic, good for him. He's clean shaven, right? And this pub is like, we don't serve blanks. And so Simon Pegg gets out his sword, which is like Gandalf's sword from Lord of the Rings, and he apparently is going to kill all these humans for these 5 robots. That is the ending of the film, and I just think that's such a weird note to end it on.
Yeah, that is quite strange. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Because they don't die. They just pull themselves back together, right?
Yeah.
So why? But he's going to kill, like, humans. Like, Mad Max style humans. It was, when I saw it happen, I was like, wait, what's the message?
The message is, he's always got to be a fuck up.
Yeah, and is that the message? Yeah, like, he's always going to be a fuck up. He's always going to be the king, for like lack of a better term, even if that means his kingdom is like these like 5 blanks that are like 18-year-old kids.
Oh my goodness.
It's so weird.
Yeah, that is a bit of a strange ending. Oh my goodness. Yeah. What? I think he just loves to fight. Like, it doesn't matter who, he just wants to fight. And I think
he's an aggressive guy.
Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, I think it is that recklessness as well.
And maybe like he's always had it. And, chasing the buzz of whatever, like, recklessness gave him, probably led him on the path of, taking drugs, and then led him on the path of where he ended up being. And like, I said at the beginning, I really don't like Gary's character, and even when you're meant to sympathize with him, it still doesn't wash for me, because I probably will cut this out because it might be a bit too harsh, because I don't mean to make light of suicide at all. I really, really don't. But I think the film is actually making light of suicide, because in that moment where Andy grabs him by the wrists and we see he's got these bandages on his wrists and the hospital tag, it's meant to like insinuate like, you know, Andy needs to be kinder to Gary because Gary's going through a lot. And I think like that sounds right, but if you take in a vacuum, you know, like, oh, Gary's going through a rough time, he's obviously tried to take his own life, Andy should be kinder to Gary. But then when you look at the context of what Gary's behaviour has been like throughout this film, his recklessness, his endangerment of his friends, his lying, his manipulation, I'm like, hold on, like, that's not, suicide isn't a get out of jail free card for shitty behaviour.
Yeah.
I've said this, this is something happening in my personal life at the moment. It's like when some people can and have used illness that has happened in order to absolve them of past behaviour. You know, they've gone, oh, you know, I might have been a dick before, but I'm dying now, so ... And I'm like, okay, yeah, really sorry to hear you're dying. Like, I don't wish that on anyone, but you know, you haven't apologized, you haven't acknowledged what you've done, so the ... doesn't mean anything. Like, just because you're ill doesn't mean that the past behavior never happened.
Yeah.
And so when I see that scene happen, I'm like, okay, hold on. I'm not saying it isn't awful that Gary's had to go through that as a character, but it doesn't absolve him of being a dickhead for the past hour and a half.
Yeah. No,
and beyond.
I feel
Is that
like...
fair, Val? Am I being too harsh?
No, I don't think it's harsh. I think it's a fair observation of just like you know, Andy is kind of given him the benefit of a doubt, even if it is under false pretenses. It's under a lie.
Yes, yeah.
And like, I feel personally that yeah, it's more... I think Andy kind of tries to be a bit more patient with him as a result of the bandaged arm. But also, you know, it's kind of a reminder of like, you're not the only person that hates Gary. You know, Gary isn't exactly happy right now either, and is not comfortable within himself, and is dealing with various issues, being addiction and being depression. So yeah, I don't know, like, I don't ever think it's yeah, I don't ever think that it's an excuse for bad behavior. But I think on a personal note, I am probably like, I kind of understand it to just be a little bit more patient. And yeah.
Andy has that balancing act throughout, right? Like, I think they all do. Like, there's this, when you think back to like, why did they even agree to it? You know, I thought that myself. I was like, if someone from my high school came to me going, oh, because I went to school in Spain, I went, oh, you know what, we want to go out in Benidorm again, like us and like, you know, the gang who I haven't seen in like 15 years, I'd be like, mate, no.
No.
No, thank you. And I get like part of Gary's manipulation is getting them on side, guilt tripping them, you know, obviously like the lie about the mum, but you know, it's a real lesson about boundaries, you know? And I appreciate boundaries is something we probably weren't discussing 10 years ago, but Gary feels entitled to his friends, and his friends don't have strong enough advocacy boundary skills to communicate clearly, no, Gary, that's enough, apart from potentially Andy. But then even Andy, like, Andy risks his own life in the pursuit of protecting Gary, even though Gary is reckless with his own life, and obviously, you know, to the point where he is willing to, like, you know, if the, this is probably the sad part, right? So say for example, this film had nothing to do with robots, had nothing to do with sci-fi, and it was just about, it was like a dramedy about these 5 men who went on this you know, epic pub crawl in their hometown, and obviously, like, Gary's entire goal is to finish the Golden Mile. What does Gary do after he finished that Golden Mile? If
Yeah, because it's kind of like, was
that's his
that
goal.
your life's mission?
Yeah.
And I don't see, this is the thing as well. Like, before the guy turns around to him in the therapy group and says, "Does it
Mm.
ever bother you that you never finished?" You kind of see his brain like click, like, "Oh, actually, yeah, it did."
Yeah.
So before that, what was his aim? Like, because obviously he was always thinking about that night,
Mm.
but he didn't seem to have a plan. Whereas that kind of sparked a plan. So was he just going through life kind of aimlessly, or
Mm.
like was it all sort of building up to this, or like, and
I
so
wonder
yeah,
if there's.
when he does achieve his plan, like, what's next?
I wonder if there's something in that where in his brain he has convinced himself that part of the reason why his life didn't turn out the way it did was because the first goal he set himself as an adult, he failed. And maybe he thinks, if I complete that goal finally, then my life can start. You know, maybe there's something in that. Like, the very first thing he set out to do as a lad who has his whole life ahead of him, he failed it, right?
Mm,
Now, that's a really harsh word because I don't think they failed it. I think they just had a really good night, right?
yeah.
But in his mind, which was like, I have to be a legend, I have to complete the Golden Mile, and he failed the very first hurdle of being the legend of Gary King. Maybe that's part of the reason why he's never been able to graduate childhood, because
Mm,
he's been stuck on the very first hurdle, which was completing the Golden Mile. So maybe, like, when I first brought this up, Val, I thought maybe, unfortunately, in his mind, Gary would be like, well, now I can die happy, air quotes, and, you know, maybe attempt again after he completed the Golden Mile. But maybe it's actually more positive than that, and maybe he would feel like, I achieved something, I did it, and then that might help, you know, start the rest of his life, maybe.
mm. I think
Which
it's
it
like,
effectively does.
yeah, like it does kind
Yeah.
of add that strut of "I am a legend."
Yeah. 100%. 100% it does. 100%.
But I feel like in his head, however unbelievable it may be, he feels like he saved the world, even though like,
Hmm.
like you said, he talked him down, and also, like, he hasn't saved the world. The world is gone back into the dark ages.
Hmm.
But also, I suppose, from perspective, from a Thanos perspective, um,
Mm.
like, is that actually essentially saving the world? Like, are we, as we become more technology advanced and rely more on, AI and technology and stuff to be able to do everything for us, are we losing ourselves and not being able to take care of the earth? And so,
Hmm.
yeah, big questions. And like,
Hmm.
um, and actually bringing us back down to being one with the planet, like, growing your own crops and looking after your community. Is that actually what we were supposed to be doing, and be able to actually, in a way, save the earth? I don't know. That's too philosophical for me
I
to
don't
even.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I guess, like, from a purely plot and theme point of view,
Mm,
I think it's bold. It's a really bold move to plunge the end of the film into post-apocalyptic darkness.
mm,
Uh, but for me, that final 20 minutes just doesn't work. And I
mm,
think, if I compare that to the other films in the trilogy, which I just feel end on a stronger note,
yeah.
it did let me down a bit.
So,
Um,
Sorry, one thing I just kind of
No, go on.
just as you said that, so films always tend to come out at the same time with similar themes.
Yeah.
So This Is the End also came out at the same time as World's End, and This Is the End
Ah.
ends with that same kind of like, it is the apocalypse, everybody is
Mhm.
gone,
Mhm.
but it ends with, what is it? They're dancing to like Backstreet, where they're
Backstreet Boys.
with
Yeah.
Backstreet Boys in heaven.
Mm. Oh, I love it, and
Yeah,
I really like that ending in comparison because it's so silly, it's so ridiculous.
yeah,
Whereas, but then that suits the tone of that film. That is a much more silly and ridiculous film. Whereas this one, it does have like a really good heart, which is
mm,
so, and like the themes of it. The themes of like not achieving what you thought you would achieve when you were a child, and getting older, and because like even like the fact that Steve or Peter or Andy, they don't have their lives together either.
mm,
Andy's separated from his missus. You've got Steve, who's in a relationship with a much younger woman. You've got Peter, who's just like looks to be miserable in his family home when he's reading his paper at the beginning of the film. They
mm,
don't. They've just got adult lives. They've just achieved like the checkbox exercise of get married, have kids. Whereas Gary hasn't done that,
mm,
but yet he's seen as a failure for not doing it. But from a happiness level, like
yeah,
Andy isn't happier, you
mm,
know. And I think again, it's like that conversation of like, well, what is the point in adulthood? What is the point in like going after these milestones if it doesn't actually make you happy? What's the point in going for a career and sacrificing your hobbies or your family life for a career when it doesn't actually make you happy but just gives you more money? So it's a good status thing, but it's a bad mental health thing.
mm,
Like, it really does bring in all of these interesting concepts, which I think the other films don't do.
mm.
And I applaud it for that, and
Yes,
obviously bringing in some really intense themes like addiction and like suicide, like that. That's like, again, I applaud it for talking about it in a very safe setting for its audience, because we know Edgar Wright, we know Simon Pegg are fantastic screenwriters. We know we like the dynamic between Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, so it feels safe to talk about these more grown up or more adult themes with this team. It just for me, it fumbles the end just a little bit, but
yeah,
that's me.
yeah. Although it became a massive meme. Shut up. What was it? Fuck off your giant lamp.
So
Every
good.
summer. Fuck off your giant lamp. Oh yeah.
Okay, so Val, is there anything else you wanted to talk about for the World's End?
I am going to look at my notes super duper quick
Okay.
just to see if I have missed anything. Um, they all hate him, but they follow him anyway.
They all
Oh,
hate him.
class.
Class, okay.
Class. Yeah, so
Yeah.
basically they're friends with Peter because he's rich, you know.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I just find that really interesting, like, because we don't really know much about Gary King's background, but I
No, we
assume he
don't.
probably doesn't come from a prominent family or whatever. And then also, he's working to, I suppose, better himself with therapy and stuff like that, or that has been made to. We're not sure, but in terms of the jobs that people have as well, like Andy
Hmm.
he seems to be quite higher up. He has his own office and
Yeah,
has his
yeah,
own receptionist and stuff.
yeah.
And then Peter is running his well, he's working for his dad's motor company generally as a
Hmm.
salesman. There's a lot of money in that. um Construction, there's a lot of money in that.
Well, he
um
says he sold his company.
yeah,
Steve sold his company, so obviously that would have come with some kind of payout. And now he's just like a
100%.
managing director, and he likes it 'cause it's less stress.
Yes, and then obviously Martin Freeman's character Oliver is selling a
Hmm.
1.2 million pound home. The commission on that,
Yes,
woo.
commission. Yeah.
But
Hey.
yeah, like he's not selling like tiny little terraced houses. These are like prominent homes. Like he's clearly um doing very well. So all four of
Mm.
them are doing very well, apart from Gary, that's still driving a
Yeah,
30-year-old car, and
yeah,
that's still got the same clothes, and yeah,
yeah.
still
No,
got an
really
old
good
Nokia.
point. Yeah, yeah, I noticed the Nokia, and I think even in that when we get to find out where all of them are now, and we have the like show where Steve is, and then we go cut back to where Gary is in his little like one bedroom bed sit type thing, and then where Peter is, and then back to the one bedroom bed sit, and yeah, you're right. It really is this comparison, and it comes back to status, right? Because we're meant to take from that montage. These men did well for themselves. Look, they've got these homes, they've got these families, they've got these nice cars, but we're intercutting that with Gary in his dingy one bedroom room. Very
And a telly as well still has a massive butt on it. It's an old
it's like,
telly.
oh, I didn't even notice the telly. Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
so like he can't afford the latest in tech, with the Nokia phone with the TV. And yeah, you're right. It is showing again. It's because we associate money with success. Like you are successful, the more money you have. That's like a general rule of how our society currently works. So therefore, we can determine from these scenes and from their jobs, they have money. Therefore, they have some kind of status in society. Gary probably has no money, if not zero money. He's even borrowed £200 from Oliver, Steve, and Peter in order to pay back Andy.
Yeah.
When that happened, I was like, why did you give him 200 quid?
I know. And it's like, obviously, they kind of had a bit of contact with him, even though when he first appears sort of in their life, they're a little bit like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit confusing, but yeah.
Yeah. We're not clear how much contact, but they obviously know him enough to recognize him.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on your notes?
The only thing I had as well, which we kind of covered a little bit, is Sam's speech that she gives about, when it's 17, it's kind of fun, but we're pushing 40 and you just got to move forward. And I just thought that was quite a sort of interesting speech as well. Just, like, and then she drives off, like literally moves forward. So, yeah, like I just felt that was a really kind of overarching theme of, you do silly stuff when you're 17 and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, God knows,
Yeah.
I look back when I was 17, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah, no, totally. There's a lot more grace when you're 17 to make mistakes. The ramifications don't seem to be life-threatening when you're 17, but potentially having sex in a disabled toilets when you're 40 has another level, like another sheen to it. When you're 17, you're silly, you're stupid, you do that all the time, whatever. But when you're 40, like, it will have a negative connotation assigned to it.
Yeah. 100%.
Right? And I think Gary doesn't recognize that because in his mind, he's still 17.
Yeah. Definitely. But yeah, no, I think there were the only two other things that I had. So
okay. So there's one more thing I wanted to mention. This is so superficial. Pierce Brosnan. I love him. I love him so much. He's so damn hot. I totally forgot he was in this film. I was like, oh, another Bond in the Cornetto Trilogy, another Bond villain.
Oh, yeah.
Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan. And Rosamund Pike is a Bond girl in Die Another Day, which is Brosnan's last James Bond film. So little crossover there. I love this scene where they meet up with, I think it seems like Mr. Shepherd, and they all revert back to being school children, and they're all like putting their hand up, going, "So, sir," and they ask him a question, and there was just something really endearing about it. And obviously he's a bad guy, so that's sad, but it is what it is. He is my James Bond. I absolutely love Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, like I'd never had like I never watched James Bond. I kind of knew
Mm-hmm.
Pierce Brosnan more from like Mrs. Doubtfire, and then
Oh, so
this,
hot, Mrs.
and then
Doubtfire.
it was actually Eurovision, which was the one that
Oh,
was like, okay, he's quite fun.
oh, he's so fun.
Yeah,
He's so fun. Have you seen Dante's Peak,
no,
the volcano film?
no,
Oh my god, Val, do you like a natural disaster film?
not that fond actually. Although I do love Twister.
Oh my god, I love
Twister's
Twister.
great, but yeah.
Oh, we got cows. No, I love Twister. So Dante's Peak is very much in the Twister realm, and Pierce Brosnan plays a geologist who is going to investigate a mountain or a dormant volcano, and Linda Hamilton is the mayor of this town. And oh my god, me and my partner fucking like we literally watched it the other day. Like we love this film. It's really, I think, is it 99? Might be 97, doesn't matter.
Is it on a
So yeah,
streaming
like
service?
I think we actually bought it because
Oh,
we
okay.
know we'll watch it again. We know,
Okay.
like, but I'm sure it's somewhere. I bet it's on now. I bet it's on now if you have now. So yeah, love Pierce. So very excited to see him. And on that note, I don't have anything more to add. So let's get to scores. Scores on the doors. So Val, you might remember from the last time you were here, but we like to rate our films based on how well we believe they represent fat bodies. And we like to rate them out of ourselves. So out of a potential 5 Vals, what will you give The World's End for fat representation?
I think I'm going to give it a 4,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because they represent Andy extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
Although it loses a point for basically shaming Steve, and for even though there's, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just for Gary being annoying, and also just like there's not a lot of diverse bodies in it, so it loses a point for basically lack of diverse bodies and shaming of Steve. But for the representation of Andy, he gets 4 Vals.
4 Vals. And, I think I've done this, well, this has happened to me quite a few times on the podcast where, because I always ask my guests to go first, and more often than not, I always agree with them. And it's just because I think through our conversation we seem to like manage to get onto the same page. But I am 100% following suit. I want to give it 4 Hannahs, and for the exact same reasons you gave. I am so thrilled by Andy's character. I am so thrilled by Nick Frost's performance. It really just made me smile, and I laughed not in a laughed at, but like a jovial laugh, like, oh my god, isn't this amazing? And you can just tell he was having a ball with it. I bet it must have been so much fun to get into that choreography and just like like you said earlier, showing off his physicality as a person, as an actor. It was just awesome to see, and like his characterization as being the leader, as being the voice of reason. Being the smart guy. He obviously was a lawyer. He's obviously very successful in his career. Like all of these things, like he's just an awesome guy. Like he's a good man. I like him. But absolutely echoing your points. The 2 jokes at Steve's body's expense are weird, and they don't make sense, and I can only imagine it's because they're trying to show that Gary's just an undermining dickhead, but wasn't happy with it. And then 100% agree with you. The lack of body diversity. I was looking in the crowd, of like the disco scene, for example, and I was like, "Come on, where are the plus size people? Where, what? There's not even like, someone in a wheelchair or someone like with a walking stick. There was just there was nothing. They were all able-bodied people, of like a slender physique." And I was like, "That's a bit disappointing. Like, why are there not any other fat blanks? Come on." Why are there no other body diversity going on in the blank space? So yeah, I completely concur with those thoughts. So we've got 4 Vals, we've got 4 Hannahs, and actually, interestingly for me, I have said a few times on this podcast where I've given it a low score for fat representation, but then I've gone, oh, but it's a 5-star film. You know what I mean? Whereas this is actually I think maybe my first example where my rating for fat representation is higher than the rating I would give the actual film.
Yeah.
So I think for me, like, it's a four Hannahs for fat representation, just as a 4 Vals for you. But I think for me as a film, it's like a 2.5, 3-star film.
Okay. Wow.
Personally.
I'm trying to think what I have it on Letterboxd. I think I have it
I don't think I've
around
put it on
three and a
Letterboxd yet.
half.
Okay.
But yeah, because I do think in terms of characterizations and editing, and I mean, Edgar Wright's editing is always phenomenal, but but also like laying out the story before, and all the signposting and everything, and nothing goes to waste in the film. I think it's just a phenomenal film, but it's not my favorite. It's probably my least favorite out of the trilogy.
Agreed. Definitely my least favorite of the trilogy, but I don't think it's a bad film. Not in the way I felt public opinion was about it when it first came out. But, and again, I appreciate it's probably like even a generational thing. Like when this came out, I would have been, how old would I have been? 21. Is that right? 21. So I don't think I could have comprehended the themes at 21 that I can now 10 years later. And so when this film came out, it's not as fun as the other two, right? But now I'm like, watching it back, a bit older, a bit wiser. I'm like, oh no, I do get it more.
Yeah.
For me, like it just lets itself down a little bit at the end for me. But again, I appreciate subjective.
Oh yeah, no, totally. But I think also it is a little bit. I think it's one of those films that as you get older, you understand it more. So
definitely,
definitely. I just turned 36, and so I'm starting. Like the first thing I realised as soon as I turned 36 is just how close to 40 I am, and I was just like, so obviously it was like that. No, but also you really start listing everything in your head, like. Almost like that checkbook of have I achieved this, have I achieved this, have I achieved this. It's like, well, actually it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, it just be happy and just be healthy. So like look after yourself, look after each other, and who cares if you've I mean, I paid a mortgage today, my first one.
Congratulations.
I know. I never thought I'd be proud of that. But that...
Well, you should be. That's an achievement.
But it's
That's
like,
an achievement.
does that
you
make me happy? Actually, yeah, it does. It does actually make me happy.
Because you can appreciate the journey you've been on to get to this point. Yeah. It's not just the act. It's the journey it took for you to get to the act. Yeah. And you should honour that and appreciate that.
But also, like, I fully stand by this of, like, all adults have an inner child, and we should totally let that inner child run loose sometimes. And for me, Halloween is my absolute big, I'm going to eat all the candy, I'm going to decorate everything, I'm going to carve an insane amount of pumpkins for some weird reason, and I'm just gonna get excited and literally wave my hands around like a toddler, and I don't care. No. And it's fine, because also I've got to go to work and I'm gonna do my job and stuff like that, but then also I'm gonna run around and sing about pumpkins because it makes me happy. I think it's about balance.
No, definitely we should all honor our inner children. They didn't go anywhere when we grew up.
No, honestly, I have a theory. If you put a trampoline in front of any adult, they're straight on
it. That's a good idea. I don't know if I would, because I'm such a clumsy person. I can imagine I'd be the one that breaks something. So I might want a bouncy castle. Might feel differently, because I think if I land, it's going to be softer.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
That's more fun.
Yes. I just want to play on the bouncy castle now.
Yeah. Probably not the right weather for it, but yeah.
No, goodness no.
Well, on that note, on the bouncy castle note, I want to thank you, Val, for joining me again on this podcast to bring the world's end, and I really, really enjoyed I really enjoyed Andy as a character, and I'm so happy to add him to the catalogue of plus size characters we've spoken about on this podcast. So I thank you for that. Can you please let me and listeners know where they can find you and more of your work?
Okay, so obviously I write for Ghouls. I have a few articles up there. I have a few like reviews and hopefully some other bits coming with Moving Pictures Film Club. I'm on Twitter at metal underscore circus, I think it is. I'm on Letterbox as Misfit Sister, which is a book by, why can't I remember her name? It's one of those weird things. Every time I try and remember her name, I'm like Sue Snell, and I'm like, no, that's the girl in Carrie.
So random.
I don't know why. It's like just at some point in my brain, the wrong name just got placed, and it's like, yep, we live here now. I find it in a second. And then yeah, that's it really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping to do more in the future, but slowly work at it. You know, get there in the end.
Absolutely.
That's
We've got other jobs to think about. It's hard to like maintain hobbies at the same time. Well, I will have a link. I will have links to Val's socials in the show notes below, and the listeners can find the podcast at Fats on Film on Instagram and Twitter. You can also email me if you want. That's at fatsonfilm@outlook.com. And you can also find me at Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, all three, at Queen Beast Says. And I will see you at the next one, listeners. And remember to stay fat.